Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to my talk here. Welcome to RailsConf 2021. I'm here to talk to you today about how to engineer in DEI, tangible steps for teams. So hello, my name is Jeannie Evans. I use she, her pronouns. I am a software engineer at SnapDocs. I live in Denver, Colorado with my partner Tegan and my cat Zombie, and we are into all the Denver activities. We like mountain hikes, we like going to breweries and parks, and recently one of our favorite quarantine activities is we just got a bird feeder and it's right outside the window. So we love watching our cat watch the birds. It's been a really exciting past couple of weeks. Sometimes the squirrel shows up. Anyways, thank you so much for showing up. This topic of DEI and how to engineer it in can be a heavy one, and it can also be very draining emotionally, mentally, and even physically. So thank you so much for showing up and engaging. So what are we talking about today? We're going to start off with what is DEI, and we're going to define that. A little bit more of a lengthy introduction because some of this might be new to you, some of this might be review, but we're really going to dive into this introduction and get on the same page. Next, we're going to be talking about engineering in DEI, so that's where those tangible steps for teams comes in. Quick wrap up, and then we will have a live Q&A. So that live Q&A is Thursday, April 15th, from 3:40 p.m. to 4:10 p.m. Eastern Time. There's also a Discord channel. I think it might be displayed somewhere. It should be visible to you now. Feel free to ask questions, come hang out. I'm going to be checking it throughout the conference, and I will also be posting a lot of resources. I am just taking a sliver out of what is DEI in engineering today. So I'm going to be adding lots of resources, and feel free, let's just keep that conversation going as much as you'd like throughout the conference. So what is DEI? DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity is the presence of differences, so that might include race, nationality, sexual orientation, religion, age, ability or disability, etc. Equity is promoting justice, impartiality, and fairness within the procedures, processes, and distribution of resources by institutions or systems. So you might recognize this picture on the right. I think the first time I saw something like this, it was like this same kind of image, but they were looking over a fence at a baseball game. Now, inclusion is really kind of what we're talking about today, because what I really want to hit on and touch upon today is like, what can we do in our engineering bubble? Okay, and there's only so much that we can do as engineers about diversity next week when we go back to work. Okay, there's only so much we can do about equity in terms of like these procedures and processes, but there is so much we can do about inclusion. Okay, so inclusion is an outcome to ensure that those that are diverse are actually, actually feel and or are welcomed. Okay, so we can kind of take this idea of inclusion and we can bake it right into our code. So who am I? A little bit of a background about me. So before tech, I had a career in education and nonprofit work for about 10 years. When I was getting my undergrad degree, I studied international affairs and peace studies. So what does that mean? It means I studied the anthropological side of post-conflict societies. How do people reconcile? How can Western influence help the reconciliation process? How can it often harm the reconciliation process? So DEI was a big part of just what I did and what I studied. But all this is to say, like, I love solving big, complex, seemingly impossible to solve problems. And this is ultimately what led me to software engineering. That and the fact that educators don't get paid nearly enough to survive, but that is a topic for another time. So when I got into tech, I started asking the question, how can we engineer in DEI? Like, what can engineers do? And I asked this at meetups and conferences and presentations, informally, in school, and I was just kind of bummed out by the answer. I was just not satisfied. because it would always kind of come back to make sure you advocate, talk to your manager, put pressure on leadership, talk to HR, talk to product, talk to design, make sure that this is part of the product. And I'm not satisfied with that answer because it's not answering the question and it's just putting the responsibility on other parties. But I want to know, like, what can we do? So that's why I'm giving this talk today. So this is me trying to answer that question. And I'm going to share a little bit about how I have been able to do that in my own work at SnapDocs. Additionally, why should you care about this? I care about this a lot. Why should you too? First of all, it's the right thing to do. But if that's not enough, you can think about it this way. Leadership, managers, and other folks are waking up to the fact that diverse teams produce better results. That's just a fact. It's Googleable. I will put some articles about that in the Discord channel, but that's just fact. And it is no longer a better business tactic to not include DEI. If you think about 2020, that was a huge year for social justice and change. People are looking to leadership and saying, we demand a change. We're going to be really scrutinizing, and we're going to make sure that we feel good about where we are spending our dollar. So, you know, it's really built into the business case as well. So moving forward, we will start seeing more expectations that engineers know what their role is in supporting DEI. And also, we're the ones that build the damn thing. So we have so much power, okay? Like, nothing gets done without us putting in that work. So let's use that to our advantage. And lastly, I do have some assumptions about the audience today that I want to share with you because we are in a virtual space. I can't ask you to raise your hand if this is true for you or that's true for you. So what I'm assuming is that there's a lot of back-end engineers in the house, probably some full stack as well. I'm assuming that you have some experience with Agile development, maybe the philosophy, and with some aspects of Scrum ceremonies at least. I'm also assuming that we have engineers here who are of all experience levels and of differing levels of exposure to DEI, both personally and professionally. So what is DEI as an engineer? So I think of DEI as an engineer like allyship. Now let's talk about this term allyship. It's whitewashed, it's lost its meaning a little bit, it's constantly changing. So what if we say active allyship? Okay, that's a little better. Or maybe we should just scrap it. Let's just scrap it all together. Maybe the term co-conspirator is better. That's actually kind of my personal favorite, or accomplice. But you know, for our purposes today, we're going to stick to the term active allyship. Emphasis on the active. We cannot really call ourselves an ally. We can't really identify as one, but we can participate in active allyship. So there are phases to active allyship, and I've seen a few different allyship journey maps and philosophies, but I'm going to just stick to these two, kind of painting a little bit of a broad brush. But what I really want to hit upon today is this idea of awareness comes first and then action. So awareness can be your self-awareness and systemic awareness. So noting this image here, you know, I think of awareness as a pretty introspective time. It's about digging deep. You know, self-awareness is about thinking, like, what is my unconscious bias? Where does it show up? What have we been taught as children or by our communities that we have internalized? What have we been taught about others that we've internalized? What might we need to unlearn? What might we need to learn about other people and about ourselves? Okay. Systemic awareness. Now, systemic awareness is about, you know, what systems have you benefited from? Or on the flip, what systems have been actively working against you? Now, I'm going to pull a quote from Building Allies, and I'm going to read it to you now because I think it sums this up really, really well. Generally, as individuals, we do not directly cause these inequalities. Those of us with privilege, however, directly benefit from these systems of inequity, and we simultaneously maintain them, even while wanting to change them. So after we do a lot of work with awareness, we can then start moving to action. So personally, this action can look like handing out pamphlets or protesting, calling your local and state representatives. It could look like standing up for somebody who's actively being discriminated against, or you notice there's microaggressions. Now that you've done this awareness, maybe you're like, that's a microaggression, and you call it out in your own community. Now, professionally, this is a little bit more on theme with this talk today. That could be like joining ERGs, employee resource groups at your company. As an ally, you could ask your company, hey, do we have a D&I officer? Why not? How do we get there? Is our platform ADA compliant? Why not? How do we get there? Now, as I was thinking of a story to kind of demonstrate the importance of doing awareness first and action next, I realized that this story might be familiar to you. So what I have found just in my own research, reflecting on my own work as a queer woman at work, was that something happens very commonly to underrepresented people in the workplace, where we go to our manager to complain about harassment or general disrespect. And in an effort to take action, the manager will bring in both parties to have some sort of mediation. And the issue with this is that this is inviting someone who has already been harassed for being a member of an underrepresented group to an unsafe situation. And also, they don't have anything to talk about, right? They didn't do anything wrong. So if that manager had done their homework, they would know that that response isn't appropriate. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about engineering in DEI. This is really where those tangible steps come in. Okay, so first we're going to talk about Agile Workflow. So again, I'm assuming that you have some experience with Agile and at least a little bit of aspects with Scrum ceremonies like daily Scrum, retrospectives, sprint planning, sprint reviews. So it's so important because so many of us use this philosophy and workflow that it's important for us to talk about this because it lays the foundation for what we do and how we do it. And most importantly, Agile is begging for DEI to be a part of it. And here's why. So I'm going to show you why by highlighting some key themes of Agile. And this kind of is what stood out to me. So these first two are from the Agile Manifesto. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. These next two are from the 12 principles behind the Agile Manifesto. Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. Build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done. Think you might be able to tell where I'm going with this. And then lastly, the concept of self-organizing teams. Now, these first three are just inherently talking about diversity, right? When we treat folks as individuals, when we truly treat them as individuals, that there's inherent diversity there. Customer collaboration. I think most companies want their customer base to be quite diverse. And business people and developers must work together. Again, business and developers, they both have overrepresented groups. They both have underrepresented groups and probably very different levels of experience and just even walking through life, right? So again, talking about diverse groups. This fourth point is DEI, okay? We cannot have motivated individuals, a supportive environment, or trust if we do not have active DEI. So lastly, self-organizing teams. So when we are not incorporating DEI into our Agile practices, we run the risk of structurelessness. So I'm pulling a little bit from the essay Tyranny of Structurelessness, and I will put that in the Discord channel as well. So what structurelessness really means is that the informal structure takes precedent. So this is giving power to those who already hold the greatest amount of power and the greatest amount of privilege in our society. So these are power dynamics kind of infiltrating our agile flow. So unfortunately, these power dynamics don't just go away because we want them to. They don't just go away because we've entered into a daily scrum or we've entered into a retro. So what are some of the ways to act on that DEI that Agile is asking for? Combat structurelessness in our professional communication and relationships, and make sure our societal power structure is not the dominant force in our space. So how do we do this? You guessed it, active allyship. So go back to that awareness. You might be new again, so that's why I'm kind of harping on this awareness piece. But if this is not new to you, still, this is a constant, growing, evolving thing. Next is facilitation. Facilitation, these are real skill sets. So if you are in a position to facilitate a meeting, even if it's casual, like a get to know you, new team member event, happy hours, study this like you would study a new language or a framework. Study facilitation skill sets like you would study a new language or framework. Additionally, provide a couple of ways to contribute: writing, meetings, surveys. And I know a lot of us have Zoom fatigue. I know I do, but Zoom is actually a really great way that a lot of these different ways to contribute are all packaged together, because you can mute yourself, you can add a little emojis in the corner, you can raise your hand, you can, there's the chat functionality. So let's say you're facilitating a meeting and it's just like a little stale, make sure you're reminding folks like, hey, you don't have to always just like unmute yourself. You can throw an emoji in the corner or something just to continue that participation from everyone. Now, the next idea to do this is mob programming. So mob programming is when you code together on teams to solve one problem. So each team member has a role and you rotate through those roles. So this kind of evens the playing field for juniors, new folks, and folks that have been traditionally silenced in the workplace and in society. So again, with those societal power dynamics, okay? So this gives a chance for everyone's voice and opinion to be heard. Everyone gets a chance to put their fingers on the keyboard. And this becomes really difficult for that loudest voice in the room to dominate the space. This also has an effect on end users. If you think about this from an age perspective, so let's say that you have a group of people leading a project and they're all like around the age of 30. We have lost the perspective of a huge percentage of our potential users. So like anyone over 35, that's massive. And I'll give you an example of when I've seen this play out in my own life. So recently we had a BuzzFeed quiz kind of floating around our family. We were sharing it, and the quiz was called, "How Privileged Are You?" And the idea behind these quizzes, at least what I feel like, is it's just meant to stimulate conversation. The results are so-so, but it's meant to kind of get the wheels turning. So one of the questions was, are your parents still together? And my partner's mom was like, no, my parents aren't together. They're not doing anything. They've been dead for 15 years. And, she meant it kind of humorously, but the impact was quite big because she lost trust in the results. She lost trust in other people's results. She lost trust in the platform. She did not want to engage in the conversation. So now apply that logic and reasoning to your users interacting with your platform and how easy it is for somebody to disengage and say, this isn't really for me. I can tell this is for this kind of person, but it's not really for me. And I can tell you as a lesbian woman that I have felt that way on pretty much most women's apps. That I'm like, this really isn't talking to me. Additionally, mob programming is known for there to be less mistakes in the code. Less mistakes means less bugs, more testing, fewer meetings, which I know probably a lot of you are down for, and easier onboarding. Now, to me, this sounds really, really scary. But like I like to have my own tickets and then pair when I'm stuck, or collaborate kind of on a as needed basis. But think about where you might do this already. Maybe some like higher intensity situations. If you have larger bugs in the code that need fixing right away. So you might do that already. And think about how the structure of mob programming might help you out. Okay, so what about accessibility? We can't talk about DEI and engineering without talking about accessibility. So accessibility is really hard to get right. And mostly I think it's because there's so many parties involved, right? There's design, product, third-party audits, there's QA, there's financial concerns, and it takes a lot of time. Now, I think a lot of when I have like gone to talks about accessibility, it's kind of like, engineers, you need to do more. And actually, I think engineers are doing a really good job. I think engineers are some of the more knowledgeable people when it comes to what does accessibility really need to look like. But where it breaks down is that collaboration with those other parties. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to kind of use some tools and how we can do a little bit more in terms of, yeah, like I said, the tools, and then also collaborating with these other teams. So this slide says tools, but I'm really talking about tools and like a potential workflow. So again, I'm assuming I'm talking to back-end engineers. If you're doing, if you're more full stack and then you're in the front end every once in a while, then this might be a little bit of review for you. But I'm also going to tie this back to how you can actually do this as back-end engineers too. So the first is HTML. Review semantic HTML. This is especially true if you're a back-end engineer who's like kind of touching the front end like just sometimes. One of the engineers on my team called the front end his kryptonite. But it's okay, just review semantic HTML. There's so much accessibility built into HTML, so there's no need to try and recreate the wheel. Okay. There's also some great tools that can help you. You can do like a quick audit of your own code in the UI. So Wave is a Chrome extension. I like Wave. That's what I use. Lighthouse is just in your dev tools. Safari has Web Inspector, and under the audit tab, you can click accessibility and it will do a quick kind of audit of your UI there. And lastly, my kind of favorite point here is so easy, and I think it can have a really big impact on accessibility, and that is incorporating accessibility into your PRs. So incorporate it into your description. Even if the accessibility isn't great, just make note of what is going on with the accessibility. Just make a couple sentences. And whoever's reviewing your code might say, hey, actually, I know a way to make this accessible. And you're pretty much just making that opportunity. You're just giving the opportunity for your reviewer to give you feedback there. Additionally, in that same token, when you are reviewing somebody's PR, push back a little bit. Make sure that it is an accessible, the code is accessible in that PR. So before I move on to collaboration, just wanted to show you, picking on the RailsConf website a little bit here, but this is the Wave extension at play. I really like it. I'm a visual person, so I like this visual feedback. It's also really great because if you're working with folks, like your design team, for example, you can take a screen grab and you can say, hey, this contrast is not accessible. Does not have enough contrast. Or I think it says it's low contrast. And so it's a little bit easier for other teams, non-engineers, to use as well. This is what Lighthouse looks like. I work mostly in the back end as well, so I am not as familiar with Lighthouse, but here's just a little view of what it looks like when you use it. So the last thing I'm going to talk about for accessibility is collaboration. Who are you collaborating with? How can you weave accessibility into those conversations? So you might be working with front-end teams. And you can work with them and say, hey, how are you planning on rendering on the front end what you're getting from the back end? Because this might impact the names of your columns and tables, right? So you might change those names, or you might update those names, or even just from the beginning, create those tables with those names, just knowing that it's going to be more accessible. Work with your product team, budget in some time for accessibility tickets. Maybe you can dedicate a couple of tickets per sprint to just kind of improve the accessibility piece by piece. QA, when I brought up accessibility to the QA engineer on my team, he got really excited. And I think, they are a great resource because it is their job to pick your code apart as best they can. They are trying to break stuff. So you might have somebody in your company who knows a lot about accessibility and accessibility testing. Lastly, design. Mostly talking about color contrast. I think that is a really easy overlook for some reason. I feel like I've seen so many UIs where there's a white background with light gray text. That is so inaccessible, but people still keep doing it. So let's say that's the design you get, and let's say you build it out, and then you take a screen grab with Wave, it will just be all red with errors. So make sure that you're collaborating with these teams if you can. So hopefully you are collaborating with all of these teams, at least a little bit, and projects aren't just being tossed over the wall from one team to the next. So in that case, there should be plenty of opportunity to have some of these conversations. Now, my last kind of idea and topic for engineering in DEI is preferred naming. And this is a project that's close to my heart. It's something I've been able to implement at SnapDocs. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I did this change, what this change looked like, and some takeaways of that process. So real quick, take 5 seconds to answer this question. What is a name? So Webster's dictionary says, a name is a word or phrase that constitutes the distinctive designation of a person or thing. Now, I think that's a pretty good definition. However, I doubt that's what anyone just like immediately thinks of when they think of a name. You think of what is somebody called, right? So let's break it down a little bit more on like, what is a name? What can a name be? It could be a legal name. It can be a preferred name. Maybe this is the same thing. It can be a chosen name. Maybe all three of those are the same thing if you get a name change. And nicknames. So for me, my legal name is Jean Marie Evans. I don't really want people to call me that. I want people to just call me Jeannie. It's been my name since I was a little girl. I want people to call me that. I introduce myself as that. It is my preferred name. Chosen name, I don't really have one. I never had to choose my own name. Again, Jeannie was just a name that I had. I don't know, maybe it was a nickname that stuck. But in any case, I don't really have one of those. Nicknames, I've got plenty. Blueberry Jam was my favorite. That didn't really stick like I wanted it to, but that's okay. So that's just an example. But obviously, like out of all of these, preferred naming is the most important, right? And what makes preferred naming so important? Now, originally, this idea was presented to me from within my own community. It was presented to me by a transgender man, and he had he was telling us a story about his own project at work with preferred naming. And he was talking about how when a legal name is displayed for a transgender person or non-binary person who has not legally changed their name either yet, or they live in a place where it's really hard to change your name, that is dead naming somebody, right? So that is harmful, that is triggering, and it's re-traumatizing. And we obviously don't want to do that to our users. So we want to make sure that we're including everyone, okay, on our platform. And he also had a story that really impacted me about a young man in India who applied to a job at this company because of their trans support and representation. He was not yet out to his parents. but he was able to go to work and be out. It was a supportive work environment. And then because of this support that he was getting at work, it actually facilitated this journey to have him come out to his parents. That's really, really powerful stuff. And so I brought this story back to my company. And so I presented the idea. My team was super supportive, but then the idea kind of went stagnant for a while. And so I just did it. I stayed late one night and I just did it and put up a PR, and I showed it to a couple folks, and my engineering manager was like, okay, love the enthusiasm, but slow down. We need to make sure all the right folks are involved. So finally we got some tickets on the board, and it should be going out into production very soon. And actually, I'm recording this in March, so by the time you watch this, it'll already be in production, which is super, super exciting and something I'm personally very proud of. So some findings and takeaways. Be realistic. I went into this thinking I'm going to be an advocate for the trans and non-binary members of my community. It's really important that we're not triggering or dead naming anybody. But then I kind of realized that this just makes sense, as do a lot of things when you're combining tech and DEI. It just makes sense. It makes sense to let folks customize their profile. Also, there's a lot of people with names like mine. Okay, they don't really want to be called their legal name. They don't have a huge connection to it. They want to be called their preferred name. Also, there's folks that would rather have the phonetic spelling of their name up, something I didn't even consider, but it's something that when I started presenting this idea, folks started saying, yeah, that's been an issue for me. I really don't want people mispronouncing my name. I'd rather spell it phonetically. Next, patience. There's a lot of learning to do for everyone, and this might feel really, really slow, but what is slow is what sticks. There's a business case. So, I think for me, it's hard for me to want to advocate for the business case just because I feel like this is the right thing to do. Why can't we all just get on board? But, not everyone thinks that way, which is okay. And people need this business case to justify, something like an accessibility audit, for example, or spending the time to incorporate preferred naming. So, but what we know though is that DEI generally is a business case in itself. People are watching, people are choosing where they spend their money wisely. So tailor this idea to your company. Like, what are your company's specific goals? And what might an idea like preferred naming make sense? And lastly, this is my favorite takeaway is it is so much easier to do this work up front. Think about it. If you have a first name field that's legal names, and you want to change that by adding pronouns. So for me, I said my pronouns are she, her, just for those of you who don't know what pronouns are. But if you want to add pronouns in a preferred naming field and display those instead of a legal first name, that is so much work. You have to do a massive investigation period because it's displayed in multiple places. It's used in multiple places. You have to check with a number of different teams in a number of different departments. This is time, energy, money, just confusion. And so if you just do this up front, what is that? Just incorporating 2 additional columns in your table? That's it. That is so much easier than doing all this work. For my project, most of the work was literally just changing the label on an input field, and it took months. Just the label, very little functionality was changed, and that in itself took months. So that is pretty much it for those engineering in DEI tangible steps. And now I'm just going to kind of wrap up with some closing thoughts. So my first closing thought is start at home. I've said this many times in this presentation, but I can't say it enough. Make sure that you are focusing on awareness first and that you're kind of constantly revisiting that, because the last thing that we want to do is jump to action and cause harm. Communicate and collaborate. This kind of work doesn't get done without it. So communicate and collaborate with your team, outside of your team. And, you know, a friendly reminder here that communication is actually more listening than talking. And lastly, DEI is not a finite goal to accomplish, but a process to stick to and learn from. And I'm a fan of metaphors, so I'm going to share one with you now. So kind of in line with this last piece, it's a process to stick to and learn from. And that reminds me a lot of gardening. And so with this process, you know, you can kind of think of it like having a garden. You know, it needs a lot of care. And sometimes it gets messy. Sometimes you'll need feedback. Sometimes you'll have to move certain plants around to different spaces. Sometimes you'll have weeds in your garden that you need to root out. And you need to start small. You start with a seed. And there's practically infinite things to grow, work on, and tend to. And lastly, this gives you life, right? Your garden gives you life and makes the lives of those around you better too. So I'm just going to leave you with a couple of questions. I will put these in the Discord channel as well. These questions involve like, what is your responsibility to DEI, bias in yourself or in the technology you use. I have a request in the Q&A and in the Discord channel. Before engaging, I would really appreciate it if you took the time to think about these questions. You don't have to share your answers or anything like that, but think about these questions, reflect on these questions before engaging, and I know that we'll have a more meaningful discussion because of it. So thank you so much. Thank you to Heather, thank you Cindy, who's my audience of one right now, and thank you audience members for showing up. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time. Again, that live Q&A is on April 15th, 3:40 to 4:10 Eastern Time. My Discord channel is the same as the title of my talk, so Engineer in Diversity, Inclusion, Tangible Steps for Teams. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to keep this conversation going, especially if you're doing this kind of work yourselves. And lastly, SnapDucks, we are hiring. Every time I look at the slide, that little duck is in a different place. But anyways, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the conference.